The sales kickoff is something that many people look forward to at the start of a new year, but we need to think about it differently. How we learn as adults is based on the forgetting curve, that over time we forget things. And this is a natural behavior for humans. We shouldn't remember literally everything that happens to our life, like what you had for breakfast 62 days ago. It's meaningless. So it's okay to forget some things. But in general, when we're trying to master a new skill, we need to practice it over time in order to be skilled at it. Now, the most unusual thing about the forgetting curve is it has shown that we forget 90% of what we learn after 30 days. So the sales kickoff, this is when you teach everybody new skills and we have this rah-rah and align everybody. But if we don't think about it again, 1 month later, you nearly forget everything that you learned. And this results in some bad behavior, that people just pick and choose what they liked about the training instead of thinking about the overall process that you're trying to impart. So therefore, you have to try and make sure that your SKO is part of a distributed learning program. Now, distributed learning is a really fascinating way of building up expertise. And if you've ever learned a new language or played an instrument, it's the same type of behavior. You need to have repetition in order to master the fundamentals. So this would come back to reminding yourself on what you learned. You learn it 100% again, and this time you forget it slower and you forget less of it. And then over time, if you learn it again, you forget even slower until eventually you always have it ingrained in yourself. And this is what mastership is all about. So make sure that when you're participating in SKO, that you break down the skills that you want and you repeat them over time very frequently. Now, once I start doing this, there's a real big concern of how much time do I spend coming up with this? And the cadence that we need to have in mind is realize that if you practice the same thing in the same way over and over and over, we get pretty bored on it. So I was inspired by John Wooden. He gave some really good insight about how he became one of the best basketball coaches for college basketball of all time. And he said that he practiced the fundamentals in unique ways. That instead of just doing the same passing drill over and over and over, he came up with a different drill that focused on passing as the core, but made it more interesting for players to want to practice. So this coaching cadence is a critical skill that we need to have when we pull up a distributed learning model. One of the things that we can do is role plays. Role plays are an amazing way to just get some repetition and think about using sales skills like athletes or musicians do to warm up before a big performance or a big game. Role plays need to be specific about a skill and then just practice it over and over and over because this is the fundamentals of being a sales professional. The next thing that we need to do is make sure that we listen to our own calls. Sometimes this is done through listening to call recordings with customers, which is a very powerful tool because there's no hiding from how you actually performed the skill. But if you don't have permission or where you live, it's illegal to record customer calls, it's really great to just record your role plays and then be self-reflective with how you actually performed on them. And then finally, make sure that you build this into a good competition. We need to make sure that the skills stand with the outcomes that we're trying to impart on mastering a new skill. So when we focus on outcomes and we highlight some best practices that has worked really well, we can do this through an award ceremony or a competition internally where we have a specific skill and everybody is given a chance to win, and that the winner is based on following the process and not just on the outcomes of closing deals or booking meetings. This type of focus will really help your team get the most out of the SKO because they will be reminded that it's much more about focusing on process, then thinking about execution, and that's where the results will come into.